Ranieri tries one!
Welcome in to Not That Kind of Gooner, an Arsenal podcast. This is the maiden voyage. This is the maiden voyage. Sorry, I'm rusty at this kind of thing. But yeah, welcome in. This is the first episode of Not That Kind of Gooner, and I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Shamsdale. We've got Drew. Drew, where can we find you, sir?
Depends on the mood and the day, and it depends on how vitriolic the world's at the moment. But on Twitter, you can find me Peachy Kid, and on Blue Sky, you can find me on Supply and Demand Drew. So there you go.
And then we've also got John. And John, where can we find you?
I'm at 305cast on X or whatever that's called nowadays, and then I'm on Yellow Ribbons at BSKY Social. I'll do that. Hold on.
Yeah,
I like that better.
So we are coming to you guys after a hell of a week. Honestly, just a lot of things happened.
All the things.
Yeah, just so before, because we'll try to keep this to an hour, so limited time. But before we jump into all of that, just kind of want to throw it out to you guys. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about the season? I think that's a good place to. For those of you who are listening, John just did a straight thumbs up.
Yeah, everything's great. I love it. It's just fantastic. Couldn't be better, Sham. Couldn't be better.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, I have two brothers who are Liverpool fans, and they're flipping out about the result, which we'll get to later. But they're flipping out about the result, and I'm just like, you guys are going to be fine. You don't know what kind of dumpster fire you're dealing with over here. So,
yeah, that's pretty much it. Dumpster fire is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Sorry, Drew, I cut you off.
It's so interesting. I was on the other day. The number of times on for me. When White just didn't appear this season, Moreno came into the club. He instantly got clocked. It was almost just like the universe saying, "I've got bad news for you coming." And I just didn't think any of us really processed it at the time.
Yeah,
but I just kind of feel like we'll get onto it later, of course. But sometimes things just don't go your way, and then sometimes part of that is your fault, but also sometimes it's just things just really don't go your way, and it's like I toil back and forth between how much could we have mitigated how the season has progressed or not progressed, and then part of it is just it just wasn't our year.
Yeah,
we'll come to it later, but for me, I'm trying to just come to the fact that it just hasn't been our season. We have to go again next year, hopefully with some smart decision making. But this year, it's just been like it's one thing after the other. And I think that's probably where a lot of the fans are starting to lose their cool a bit, because it's been one thing after another. There's been no break. It's just been body blow after body blow. I think it's kind of hard to take at the moment.
It's just been tiring, right? I mean, for those of you who are listening who have been under a rock for the last 8 months, first of all, I'm jealous. But second, there's been the refereeing, just anomalies, just crazy shit that we're seeing.
Are they anomalies though? Are they?
Not really, not for us.
No.
I think in the grand scheme of things, for every team, they're anomalies, but they're all happening to us.
Yeah.
It was really funny seeing people complain about Michael Oliver today, because I was like, oh, well, we've already dealt with that twice this season. So, but yeah, the referees pulling out these limited edition yellow cards and red cards I've never seen in my life before. Kicking the ball away is suddenly a thing for a month. And then just the injuries that have piled up, right? You have Tomiyasu. We haven't seen him since last year. We have Ben White, missed time with the knee issue. Martin Odegaard missed 2 months. Bukayo Saka went down for several months. Jesus is out for the season. Timber and Calafiori were in and out of the squad at the beginning of the season. Declan Rice was missing time. Now Kai Havertz is done for the season. Martinelli's out for a month. The only guy who has managed to stay fit is Thomas Partey, who has famously not stayed fit his entire time at Arsenal, which I think is a sign of the end times. But it's just exhausting, dude. Like, you get to a point where you just kind of you want to stop hearing information, and you just kind of want to like go to the next game and like be like, oh no, Havertz isn't playing. Okay, interesting, and just rather learn about it that way.
There's only so much you can compartmentalize in a season, and the hits keep on coming, and it's one of those seasons where it was supposed to. This was it. This was supposed to be our season. Like last season, we're right there, and then all of a sudden you have the situation where City's kind of dropping stuff, and Liverpool is not. I mean, they're great, but then they're messing up here and there, and then have this opportunity to just take advantage of it, and it's so frustrating that some of it's out of our control, and then I'm sure we're going to get to it later. Some of it is in our control, and yet we just don't, carpe diem, and it's really frustrating. So, I mean, yeah, the injuries are one thing, but I wonder if it's kind of indicative of a bigger issue, and I don't know if it is, but I'm sure we'll get into it. But it's rough. It's rough. And then you have Edu leaving in the middle. You had this like plan. You thought like everyone's going in the same direction in this club, and that everyone has this idea of what we're going to be going in the future, and that's the lip service that we got. And then in the middle of a season where we're supposed to be, again, our season that we're supposed to challenge for the title, you lose your football. You lose Edu, and yeah. Anyway, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we get to the transfer window, because I think that's probably the big thing that everyone's talking about right now. We went the whole month without signing a player after, at the end of December, Jesus, again, tore his ACL out for the season, and Saka tore his hamstring. Sounds like he'll be out until anywhere between mid-March to early April or something like that, maybe a little bit later than that as well. Two major injuries when we already, I think, entered the season a little light in attack, and Arsenal failed to make a single signing. Window shuts, Martinelli's out, Kai Havertz is done for the season. So, John, I'll go to you first. I mean, how on a scale of 1 to 10, like how frustrated are you with the club hierarchy in the wake of the Havertz injury, especially?
And all right, so I'm going to dissect that a little bit, because you used the word club hierarchy, and I'm not 100% sure what that is anymore. We used to have an idea of what, like, who kind of made the calls, and like that there was a collaboration. And then again, like I said, once Edu left, now it's kind of going, who do we point the finger at here, if anyone? It's almost difficult to kind of assign. I don't want to say assign blame, because I'm not sure that's productive or the right way to kind of assess the situation. But we're in a scenario where clearly we're not at an optimal level to be challenging on multiple fronts here, and you start wondering what is the framework that we need to blame for that. Again, I keep using the word blame, and I don't want to, but it's at a certain point, you run out of road, but to call it the necessity to blame something.
Yeah.
And so in terms of 1 to 10 as to what I'm thinking here, I mean, I'm pretty frustrated. I don't know if I can even assign a value to it, because it's like whatever I say will be arbitrary. It's pretty bad, though. It's over a 7.
Yeah.
It's somewhere between 7 and infinite. And the problem I have is it's kind of that problem that we always had as a club, at least within the Wenger era and coming in the Wenger era coming in now, where we're always a few signings short. And before it was a defensive midfielder that was like notoriously one, and now it seems to be a striker, some attacking players, and we're just not getting that piece that's right there that everyone can see, and it's for a multitude of different reasons. But at the end of the day, you can't expect to go and challenge on multiple fronts in a season where we already knew there was going to be fixture congestion.
Yeah.
We knew we're going to be in the Champions League now. We knew we're going to have all these domestic cups, and there's all this pressure now on Arteta to get some kind of domestic success. And yet we come to the window and we just don't execute properly, in my opinion. So very frustrated, and then it's easy to see the Havertz injury and go, in retrospect, and this is what I was talking about in our group chat. In retrospect, we should have done X, Y, Z. That's kind of easy. It's almost a cop out. But how many in retrospect moments can this club have where eventually they start piling up, and you start going, all of this was very, very identifiable early on, and probably preventable. So at some point, blame is the only word you can use.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Because, on the one hand, it is easy to just kind of say, in retrospect, you shouldn't have done that thing, right? But I think just, especially entering like the last 2 weeks of the window, the number of people who said, we absolutely cannot exit this window without at least one forward signing. A lot of people were saying 2, kind of myself included. But, I think, like you said, this was a really straightforward thing to identify would go wrong. And sure enough, the moment the window closed and you lost Martinelli and Havertz, those are 2 really big I told you so moments, right? For me personally, I'm at a 9. And the reason why I'm not at a 10 is because there are several players who weren't worth getting or wouldn't have helped us, right? I think guys like Matisse Tell were making demands and maybe weren't going to be able to contribute at a level that we wanted. I think there are a lot of guys out there like that maybe others in the fan base are pointing to as options. But at the same time, the one that's really like bothered me especially is Ollie Watkins, right? Because Villa, according to The Athletic, Villa essentially told us that if we offered £60 million for him, they would consider that. We took 9 days to send them an offer of 40, which they promptly said no to, and by that time, Saudi had come in very strongly for Duran, right? And there's that. I'm also kind of looking at Rashford on loan with half his wages covered, and I'm just like, that's something I would have entertained. But yeah, it's just, it's supremely frustrating because, I feel like the club really entered this window and I don't want to say they gave up. Do you think it's fair to say they gave up or they wrote off the season?
I don't see how you can. And Drew, I'm sorry, I just don't see how you can say that. That would be an ultimate dereliction of the responsibility of the management, of the coach, of the entire team, to say, oh, we just give up. I mean, giving up is tantamount to failure, in my opinion. Especially with all of this clearing out that we had last season with the wage structure and things like that. We kept getting this lip service about this big summer push that that this was it, and that we were ahead of schedule maybe last season, but now we're kind of pushing toward anyway. I that's
yeah. I don't think yeah, Drew, let's come to you.
Yeah, to me, by the way.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry for teasing Piers in the first episode. Microphone decided to die at the worst timing possible. Much like our season. The perfect microcosm. So basically, for me, I just kind of feel like it's a little bit of column A, a little bit column B. I've always kind of defaulted to what the club kind of feel in terms of when you get to a certain point in the project you're trying to build, you do have to start to consider the level of players you're bringing in. And if the club kind of feel like they only want to bring in players that elevate either the floor or the ceiling, both, I understand that point. However, I do feel like you've reached a critical point of failure, which is what happened when Jesus went down injured, where the club have to say, we kind of have to now maybe loosen that kind of like chokehold on that one particular point and just slacken maybe the how they view players currently. And, Tom and I spent a bunch of time earlier on his podcast talking about certain players we could have or couldn't have done. Transfers are always nuanced, though, right? Like you and I and John sat on a chat talking about certain players, particularly, you mentioned it, Mathis Tell, Watkins, Kolmani, like whoever it may have been, right? And I'll always say that fans will always look to players that we feel like we can go get, rightly or wrongly. There's something wrong with that inherently. But the reality is those players also have requirements that they also need met. And if we don't meet the requirements for them, why would they also then come to us? So it's tricky, but I do feel like at the end of the day, the club did get that one aspect wrong. I was fine with maybe not getting a winger in, okay. But if you want to bring in a forward who can maybe play multiple positions, that probably would have been the most prudent thing to do. And now, unfortunately, the club leaves itself in a position currently moving into the summer where they have to be as close to perfect for the business we need to do. And it's a lot of business. It's not just spending $250 plus million on whoever we need. It's selling the right players for the right fees, doing the squad overtime we have to get through again, all under a new sporting director who we don't even know who that's going to be yet. And for me personally, and I said this to Tom on the show, where if it ends up being Jason Ato, I think he failed his audition this January, where we didn't do what we needed to get done. And Arteta has come out publicly numerous times and said, under no certain terms, that we need players. We haven't gotten those players. So, yeah, I just kind of feel like, and we kind of bantered back and forth and made points in the chat before where there probably was at least one player in Europe's top 5 leagues we could have brought in. There had to be at least one, right? There likely was. Again, I understand what the club's position is, but at the same time, no matter what the data kind of tells us in terms of overworking players or whatever it may be, you still shouldn't allow yourself to be so critically short in players where if you're looking at if your key players continuously go down injured, you have to at least give yourself some kind of temporary solution to at least get yourselves over the line, because now we're talking about a scenario where we're panicking about who we're going to get champions next season to the league, and that's just basically because of we're just lacking bodies. So it's frustrating and it's tricky. It's not all our fault. We'll come on to that later, but certainly in this one particular aspect, we didn't do enough.
Yeah, in terms of like the blame and who to assign that to, I look at it in 2 ways, right? The first way is in terms of the title race. The margins for error are so razor thin now, right? So if you lose Martin Odegaard for 2 months, if Bukayo Saka tears his hamstring, you're already probably done, right? If you have one right back, to the point where like you're cycling in one of your midfielders to play right back just so you don't kill the other guy, right?
Probably not good. Probably not
the best. Yeah. So for me in my head, this wasn't ever really about winning the title. A couple of the guys in the market I looked at as maybe someone who could help us go a little further in the Champions League. But for me, unless Liverpool decided to implode, I wasn't going to bet on winning the title, right? So that's kind of the first way I look at it. We're just sheer bad luck really took that away from us, and I can live with that. On the other side of it is the floor, right? And when you have spent all season dealing with injuries, when your forwards are dropping like flies, when your only recognized center forward is ending matches holding his hamstring and barely able to walk, you got to do something. No one's going to walk through that door who's going to lift us the Premier League trophy in May. But there were plenty of people who could have come in through that door who at least keep the bottom from falling out, right? And I think, the winning window is limited. But for this season, I would have been okay as things stand. I would have been okay just getting to the finish line as one of the top 4. We regroup, have a serious summer, and then we go again. Right, and that's the part that really grinds my gears, is that we looked at that, and we the board were at games watching Havertz just exhausted at the end of matches, and they said to themselves, that guy can stay fit until the end of the season. We don't need to spend 15 million. We don't need to do a loan, anything like that. And I think it's negligent, quite frankly. The title stuff, I'm fine with where we are, but I think really just not ensuring that we stay at that base camp of Champions League football has really kind of eroded a little bit of my faith in the club hierarchy. So That's kind of where I am. I'm trying really to rein it in. I could say way more extreme things.
You said the word negligent,
yeah.
and people throw that word around, but I mean, if you think about it as the failure to take the proper care to ensure, under the circumstances, to ensure that someone isn't injured, or in this case, there isn't damage to our goals here in the club. I mean, there was a failure to take appropriate measures. In any way you slice it, it's really, you have to do some mental gymnastics to come to the conclusion that we did not act in a way that was appropriate for us to maximize our attempts at the goals that we've set for ourselves. All right, at a bare minimum, and you mentioned Odegaard, and you know what? I was one of the people before the season, very much on record, saying we need some kind of a backup to Odegaard. I was really happy with Nwaneri and the thought of that, but it was a risk for the young player. He ended up being fantastic, and that's great. But again, getting injured and things like that, I'm okay with the club taking risks. But then when you lose players like Emile Smith-Rowe, Vieira, you start thinning the squad out, and then you're relying on a player like that. I mean, you can't. If we had not struggled in the games that Odegaard was out, we'd be in a very different position right now. Yeah. And you could say the same about Saka. Obviously, you lose two of your best players. It's going to be hard to replace them. I get all of that. All right, I get it. But then we come back to this notion of no one. That's what we got. We got no one to cover there. We have no one except Raheem Sterling, which, at the transfer deadline day kind of a deal, which on paper maybe made sense, but then, the reality of it has been one of the most disappointing signings I think we've made in a while. Yeah. And I guess we could talk about that a little bit more, but it's very hard not to use the word negligent. It is. And it sucks because you don't want your club to be negligent, even regardless of what your goals are. Let's say you wanted to win the Champions League or win the league. Even getting top four now, we're talking about, well, we're a little struggling now for top four. We went from maybe we can win the league to let's hope that we get Champions League football next season. What the hell?
Yeah. And it's funny because, it's not funny. I'm going to make it funny because it's only we're going to survive the next couple of months.
Gallows humor.
Pretty much. If we're not at that point yet, but a month from now, and sometime in mid-March, we might actually be in the reality where we're actually hanging on the top four for dear life. And I think if the club was to drop out of Champions League football for the first time, I would not have a position to say fans need to relax, because even I would be pretty furious as well. And I did say, when we spoke before, I said it on Twitter, again, there were certain things the club could have done. And I'm always good for history reference, so people should understand that now when it comes to this podcast. That if you look at the mistakes that we made in terms of this season, particularly in January, it's almost like the Soviet submarine program, where they had constant problems with their submarines. They were always getting issues. They didn't listen to the whatever, like the point of failure things that would come up, and then you would get massive disasters like the Kursk or whatever. And that's kind of like where we're at now, I feel like. And I think there are certain things that were out of our control. Yeah, pretty much. Like, I feel like there were things that weren't in our control, like Ben White, Marino. Those are things that weren't in our control. And at that point, you just have to hold your hand up and say, you know what, that's just rotten luck. But I do feel like, and I do remember John going on record about Odegaard and getting back up. Him and I'm pretty sure I had a conversation about that. Mm-hmm. Where there's such a fine line now with modern football in terms of every player basically, and it's not just our players, every player at this point in modern football is very close to, going too close to the sun in terms of hamstring problems. Hamstring problems now account for 40% of non-contact injuries in football. That's the lion's share when you consider all the other options. And, Nicholas Jackson just did his hamstring as well. And so he's out to April for Chelsea, and he's played 1,000 fewer minutes than.
Drew, we
you lost him.
Yeah,
there's back.
Sorry. Yes,
there you
the
go.
computer keeps trying to reconnect to my AirPods, which is actually really annoying. What I was saying was, so Nicholas Jackson's played 1,000 fewer minutes than Kai Havertz, but still did his hamstring. And he has not played an European campaign. He doesn't complete the same amount of 90 minutes. He doesn't really get the same commitments internationally as Havertz does, and he still did his hamstring. And I think that's just kind of the reality now. I think so. Arsenal and other clubs, but we'll just focus on Arsenal for now. One of the things that the club can do moving forward, it's not just about getting depth. It's ensuring that you protect the players that you have, because the reality is when you're going for Premier League honors, when you're trying to push in Champions League, your best players are still going to play 90 to 95% of the time from the off. They're going to start. But the key now is, and I'm not going to focus on other teams, I'll just focus on us, that we have to better protect the players that we do have. So if you're going to start Saka in 36 out of 38 Premier League matches, that's fine. Make sure he's not always playing 90 minutes. Bring him off 15, 20 minutes if you can. But also, I think clubs have to now start looking at being more strict in terms of not letting players go for senseless international duty that just doesn't make any sense. Like, Saka should not be going to England camps when they play Uzbekistan and Slovenia or whatever it is. Like, there's no reason for that. And if you kind of spread out those 2 or 3 international breaks across the season, that's 6 weeks that he would get to be able to help his body recover across the season. That actually would make some kind of a difference, right? Because now players at the top level, we'll use Saka as the example, he's now the face of Arsenal. He is first choice right wing for England. He's going to play every tournament, whether if it's Euro, World Cup, Nations League, whatever it might be. He's likely going to be starting under Thomas Tuchel, and we have to live with that. So the reality then becomes that players very rapidly no longer get those 2 or 3 months off in the summer they need to actually properly allow their body the rest and recovery they need from a high-intensity season in the most intense league in the world. So, and understand that I make that same argument where, like, it's hard to find players who want to come to Arsenal to sit on the bench behind Saka and just not play because it's Bukayo Saka. They're not going to start over him. I do think that's going to be hard to find those players, but we still have to do what we can to even find those small percentage points to protect the players just that little bit more. And I feel like that's also a thing that maybe we're not talking enough about this past season, or even season before that, or whatever it may be. And I think the case study now is this season, where it shows that it's like the empirical proof is there, that you have to do what you can to pull those players away, even 2 or 3 percentage points away from that red line, as much as you can. You won't always be able to, but if you had an opportunity to, you have to do it.
Yeah. And, I think we were okay this season about getting Saka off the pitch when we could. And when we signed Sterling, that was kind of one of the reasons why I was okay with it, because Sterling is someone who can play across the front line, so that's someone who can take minutes off of Saka. Unfortunately, we're having a Willian-esque season from him, but the idea was there at the least. I still don't love that we waited until deadline day to bring him in on loan, and that was the best we can do in terms of player quality. But yeah, John, what are your thoughts, kind of just like on how football generally is, just the crazy schedule is really impacting players?
I mean, it absolutely is. And look, you can put a blame, negligent, whatever you want to say on the club, but they are kind of fighting with a hand behind their back, and most clubs are, given something that's completely out of their control, right? The international fixtures, the congestion of the TV schedules, and how they want to amplify their profits by shoving as many match weeks in as possible and in different games within a week. It's been just nonstop. It's crazy. I don't remember a season as full of Arsenal games, or just football everywhere. It's been, it's getting more and more and more. And it's kind of, especially with now it's a little bit amplified with this different Champions League format, and there's some uncertainty there. So I'm very cognizant of this external influence that has nothing to do with whether we sign the specific right player in a position, right? And it goes to increased injuries, it goes to increased strain, bringing players closer to the red line, like Drew was saying earlier on. All of those are relevant and have nothing to do with anything that we did or didn't do in the transfer market. The only problem, and we can keep coming back to it, is this notion of, again, we knew this was going to be the case. This wasn't a surprise. We knew that this was going to be a hurdle that we needed to overcome in some form or another, and the proper response to that was some sort of a scaling out of the squad. as Arteta said, we had one of the lightest squads, given the injuries coming into the season and the numbers that we had in the Premier League. And then we lost a few more players due to injury. Key players, very unlucky. I get it. There's luck involved in this, and Murphy's Law, the worst thing will happen at the worst possible time, and that certainly tends to happen to us. And of course, there's things that you can't account for, like referees losing their mind. Although, historically, I think that's something that we can anticipate as an Arsenal fan. You need to factor in, okay, guys, we're ready. We have this game plan, but just know that the ref can screw us at any given moment. So, and they will. It's like. I said Murphy's Law. The worst thing can happen at the worst possible moment. Well, that tends to happen with the refereeing decisions that we never end up seeing again. So, again, that just will lump into this category of things that are completely out of the club's control. But, again, it's something that's extremely frustrating. I don't know if just signing more players is the right response to that, but not signing enough players certainly doesn't help the situation, So had we done that and still struggled, okay, fine. But it's like we kind of just didn't even attempt it. We just, And here's the thing. I've been an Arsenal fan long enough that I think that you see this argument, just sign more players, and that's an easy argument to make. Yeah, more stuff is great, and that doesn't always work. Look at Chelsea. Okay, they signed every player on earth, and even they're having key problems with their key players, and they're struggling. So it's certainly not a sufficient condition for success. But I think there's an element of it being a necessary condition for success, especially with the increased fixtures that we have. Meaning, it's not enough to push you over the line, but it's certainly something that you need, I think, to be in a situation where there's congested fixtures, where there's international duty, where there's all of these things that now that our players are doing extremely well, it's one of the downsides to the success of a squad like Arsenal, is that now you have players that are doing well. Great, that's awesome. Saliba doing well. Guess what? He's getting called up for France now. Oh, Gabriel's doing well. Big Gabby's doing well. Now he's getting called up to Brazil. Martinelli getting called up. Saka getting called up every week now, even against, like Drew was saying, these ridiculous matches that have nothing to do with anything, these friendlies against these sides.
Played for Greece under an interim manager in a friendly, all 90 minutes.
Exactly. It's completely unnecessary, but you got to know that now. Like, you should have known that these players were going to be getting this kind of attention, and that it was going to be another factor. Again, anticipated. You should have anticipated this. And to do functionally nothing is, I don't know. I don't really. That's where my frustration comes from. I don't even know how to articulate it properly. It was there. It was there. It was a low hanging fruit. I can't tell you we should have signed XYZ player, okay? I'm not the person to ask that. But surely the resources that we have as a club, someone. And it's just hard to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I think the thing about I think the main error that the club really made in January was kind of just not showing us that luck was the reason, or not making it so that luck was the only possible reason why we could fail, right? If you brought in a guy and we kept on getting ridiculous refereeing decisions, or that guy stepped on the pitch and his ankle twisted the wrong way, then, fair enough. That's just shit luck. You can't really put that on the guys. But, just to kind of say we'll be fine trotting Havertz out there with his hamstring half off the bone already, we'll be fine starting a 17-year-old for the next 1,500 minutes of the season straight. We'll be fine starting, Sterling, who has shown us thus far this season that he really doesn't have much left in the tank. These are... I think it's the greatest irony of this window, where the club was trying so hard not to take any big risks, and by doing so, they made a bunch of really, what's what I'm looking for here? Inadvisable gambles.
Yes.
It's like sitting in a burning house, and you're watching the fire get bigger and bigger, and you're not pouring things on it because you're worried it's going to make you're worried is going to make the fire grow bigger. It's not the best analogy I've ever come up with, but you know, I feel like we just decided to sit in a burning house and not take action because we were worried we'd make the fire worse instead of trying something. You know,
I think that's a great. Actually is a good analogy, and I think not only are we worried about making the fire worse, I think we're worried about throwing the wrong things at it, because it sounds like we have this future plan. Oh, I want to redo the kitchen, and if I throw this in there, I can't do that. You know, so I think we had this future plan this perfectly tuned thing maybe that we're trying to do, and I think a lot of our decisions were we don't want to upset this balance that we've been developing, and I think that unfortunately, if you're trying to get this Goldilocks, you know, porridge is perfect situation, you're going to necessarily be relinquishing areas that are necessary to pursue what you need to do in a season.
Yeah.
It's also funny because you guys bring up Sterling again, and I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about Sterling for this season, rightly or wrongly, unfortunately not. But I think he's almost like that prime example we can point to right now as to maybe why the club were afraid to take another risk in January. Ironically enough,
yeah.
And it's so funny that we've come to that, and it just hit me when I was listening to you guys. Like, you know what? Maybe that's the reason why they didn't. And I think on paper, as Sham, you said before earlier, that on paper it made sense. He can play across the front three. He's got experience. We've got some young kids coming through. Arteta knew him as well. He spoke highly of Sterling. Sterling spoke highly of him. So it seemed to tick all the boxes. And I think, thankfully, the only reason why the Sterling deal isn't any worse than it currently is because we're not paying any of his wages. There's no loan fee involved. It's a complete dry loan, and that's the only thing that is, I think, saving most fans from melting down completely about it. And part of it's just like kind of a half meltdown. But I do think because that deal has turned out to be so poor that the club didn't want to repeat that in January. Almost enough. But then to John's point, I think, again, I agree. I think there's got to be a better balance, right? I think we know for a fact that we made, play for Ollie Watkins, and we didn't like the valuation that Villa wanted. So we said, well, why would we pay this amount of money for a player who's about to be 30 before the end of the season? And for the same money, we can go get Benjamin Šeško in the summer, and he has a much higher ceiling, and presumably he's going to be one of the new bigger pieces moving forward. I think that was how the club analyzed it in their mind. That one aspect I agree with, but it doesn't also mean you can't go out and find somebody else. I think that's kind of where the club then got it wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with the club having... I mean, Goldilocks is kind of a good analogy, that Goldilocks kind of players you want. I think there's nothing wrong with aiming high if you can view these players, and I'm sure we've scouted these players excessively to the point where we have about 30 pages of on all of them, and it would make sense at that point. So we know, as close to being for sure, that those players will take us to the next level. That's not a bad thing. And if you're worried about losing those opportunities, then make sure you do things that kind of future-proof what we're doing for the rest of this season, so we are still attractive to those players next season. Because what happens if, worst case scenario, we don't get Champions League football next season? We're not getting Benjamin Šeško. I can almost guarantee you that. We're probably not getting Zubimendi, who's now getting overtures from Real Madrid. We're then risking those things as well. So
we're also probably losing some players.
We're absolutely losing some players as well, for sure. And what's going to even... I can't even... Please.
The thought of even... I don't want to even discuss that yet, because we all know exactly what you're thinking right now.
Right.
We know,
the thing is, if we don't get
Champions League, guarantee the player you're thinking
right now. Yes, gone if we don't get Champions League. That's kind of where it is. Like, we may have to just understand that's the reality. I do kind of feel like, in that point, I think that's also part of how we consider the club failed, where it wasn't just we didn't get in the body or bodies we need to see out the rest of the season, but in doing so, we also potentially risked what we're doing next summer as well. And I don't think enough people are maybe even talking about that one particular point. And it's complex. It definitely sucks, but I do kind of feel like, again, I guess I'm kind of what you guys are just saying, where like you've got a balance between what you want to do and what you need to do. What makes them what's critical in the moment sometimes has to supersede what you want to do 6 months from now. So.
Yeah. And it, this obviously isn't to say that making moves in the transfer market is easy, right? None of us think that this works like it does in FIFA or Football Manager, but at the end of the day, just because it's hard doesn't mean that you're excused if you're unable to pull it off. So, yeah, it's disappointing. I think we've gone through it pretty adequately, but yeah, we'll see if we can just 1 month. Just hang on for a month, and then Martinelli comes back, maybe Saka's back, and then we'll see where we are. Kind of on the subject of future transfers, right? We're talking about kind of the summer plans, and I do think this is kind of prudent because Sammy Mockbell of the Daily Mail was at the Arsenal Supporters Trust meeting this week, apparently, and he was sharing some things that he knew, and so he said a couple things that are contradictory, but basically, as I understand it, he kind of intimated that he expects Šeško to happen, as long as we don't have an epic collapse at the end of our season. He expects Šeško to happen. He's pretty confident that Zubimendi is going to be joining us. Also thinks that Severin Naipan, Naipan will say yes to us. I think he also indicated that Williams was open to joining as well, or more open than he has been in the past. And I think Joan Garcia as well. I think he said that we are kind of as close to set as possible to activating that release clause. So, I mean, that sounds like it's going to be kind of the main 5 signings we make in this window. So, assuming those all come to pass, how would you feel about that window heading into next season?
Assuming no one relevant leaves?
Assuming no one relevant leaves.
I mean, that's a solid window, man. But it's almost hard to, I think that'd be a good window. I think it would. I think it's addressing some concerns that we have. And it's hard for me to overlook the season, though. Yeah. And I think part of it is how deep does this collapse happen, and that's something that, assuming there is one, okay, because we're making assumptions that we can't pull this off somehow, which is very possible we could. But as Drew said, part of this is that's all really great now. Does that still exist, depending on how this season plays out? And that's my biggest concern. But that wasn't your question, so I'm going to be fair to the question, and I'm going to say I think that would be a good window.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree. I don't see how you could really make that window better. And genuinely, I don't want to... I've got too many thoughts about this kind of thing. But the only thing I would say is the only question I would have surrounding it is I think time has proven now, especially over the last 3-4 years as the Premier League continues to evolve, that a lot of players will struggle to come in and come to grips. I'll give a prime example. Milos Kerkez at Bournemouth. For most people, one of the top 3-5 left backs this season in the Premier League with Bournemouth. How he's come on. He was pretty poor his debut season last season. But Bournemouth are the type of club that will allow you to have that bedding in period. They kind of work you through a poor first season. You progress. You come to grips with it. The next season, you're in a much better place. Unfortunately for Arsenal, we don't have that luxury when it comes to the signings we're trying to make in the summer. All those signings that you made, bar Garcia, who would be a backup to David Raya. Šeško has to come in and hit the ground running, hopefully, because that would be the whole point as to why we've been chasing him for the last 2 years. Is he would be an upgrade on Kai Havertz, so you would want him to hit the ground running, right? Nico Williams, if we do get him, and I have other thoughts about this for another time, given that he would want to become the club's highest paid player, you have expectations based off that number. If you're paying him £300,000 a week, he better start from match day 1 and be that good off the bat. Naipan obviously is a young kid. His ceiling is immense, but he would not be coming in to start, so you've got some grace period for that. Zubimendi, same thing. You would have to theorize that it would be Zubimendi behind Rice and Odegaard as the midfield three. So you would want Zubimendi to come in and have a requisite level from the beginning. So my only issue with that window is I think for talent value, it's great. But the question would be the players that are not coming from, all of them are not coming from the Premier League, every single one of them. How fast will they bed in? And that's when you start to have people suggest, you have Semenyo from Bournemouth. Maybe you go after him and not Williams because he's Premier League proven, and that has shown being Premier League proven actually does matter when it's at a certain level. And that's the reason why Cole Palmer left City and started smashing for Chelsea from minute one, because he was already adapted to the Premier League, right? Whereas other players like Nkunku was great at RB Leipzig. Fantastic. To the point where a lot of Arsenal fans wanted him. But now he's been absolutely horrendous at Chelsea. We don't know if that's because of the club or the player or a mix of both, but it just shows that no matter how good a player is, they don't always adapt, right? So my only question would be, will we be relying too much on outside talent as opposed to looking at maybe someone that's already here that can maybe do the same, that bring that same level? But that's kind of just my own tertiary issue. Beyond that, talent-wise, it's the kind of talent profiles you want, and I think with those 5 signings, if they all did hit the ground running, we'd be right back in it again for pushing to the league as well. So.
Yeah.
And I also have a question as to how many of them are going to injure their hamstrings the second they put on the pitch in preseason.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same that boat of preferring Semenyo over Williams, just because it's for me, it's what you're trying to do with every transfer is eliminate layers of risk, right? And experience, that's eliminating a layer of risk. Not having an injury history, that's another layer of risk. And then for me, I think one of the biggest is experience in the Premier League. I think that's a very big layer of risk. And like you said, we've seen it this season with guys that we signed. Marino took a second to adapt and got injured like his first week here. Calafiori, performance-wise, I don't think he's needed that much time to adapt, but maybe physical demand-wise, I think maybe that was an issue for him based on the amount of injuries he's had this season. So, I would just much prefer Semenyo. Nico Williams doesn't really also strike me as someone who wants to go to Arsenal. You know what I mean? That guy has so publicly been connected to Barcelona. So to get him, I feel like we're just keeping him warm for Barcelona until they eventually figure out their money issues and come knocking for him. So I think, Semenyo is someone who is a boyhood Arsenal fan, used to the Premier League, very, very talented player. I think he'll be 26, 27 if we sign him this summer, so that might be something that people have a problem with. But, yeah, I would prefer him.
People would have an issue with getting a player who's about to enter their prime. I don't understand that logic as well.
I was just going to say...
I'm sorry, getting a 26-year-old is not a bad thing. And I agree getting someone who's maybe 30, 31, that's maybe too far away, although unless there's someone like a Harry Kane, unless they're elite, you don't want to really get a 30-year-old. But I would say, one of my coworkers who's a rabid Barca fan was saying that a lot of Barca fans expect Rafinha to inevitably go back to the Premier League because if Nico Williams, who publicly has kind of this bromance with Lamine Yamal, you look at Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams on both flanks, and that's Barca set for ever, basically. Mm-hmm. So if Rafinha was to come back to the Premier League, you'd have to think that we would be in that discussion. And he's already Premier League proven. We wanted him before. We know that for a fact. Arteta did want him before he went to Barcelona. So that's just something we kind of throw into the mix as if we're throwing out names. One to maybe look out for in the summer. We never really know. So
Rafinha, that was the one, man.
Yeah. Potentially.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine what could have been,
Yeah. A lot of that going to happen in the next couple of months. So, I don't know. What I do want to kind of ask you guys, it's kind of a topic on social media now for obvious reasons. If it was down to you, how are you setting us up against Leicester at the weekend? And this is the thing, we've seen so many different posture of 11s. We've got Marco Moreno playing at 9. We've got the more traditional, maybe Trossard doing the false 9 kind of deal. What do you guys think is the best way we can set ourselves up to maybe get 3 points? Because even though we should be beating Leicester comfortably, they're sitting in the relegation zone. They're just the kind of side that they would just get some kind of result. You'd have a Jamie Vardy banger in the 89th minute to fucking win the thing or whatever. How do you guys feel like we're gonna, or how should we kind of tackle that game? I'm kind of curious how you guys think about that.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head, and because I mentioned this in the group chat. We should beat Leicester, but the fact that Liverpool dropped points makes me. I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna do it.
Sure.
Obviously, on paper, we beat them, and I think that that Arteta can come up with a bunch of different solutions to do that. Did you say Marino and 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently
Is that a thing?
That's a mooted option.
People
I'll
really,
tell you now. I've been staying off like reading anything about Arsenal for a while. I've just been like going with the vibes and like just so I don't really know what's out there right now, but if that's something that's out there, that's pretty spectacular, and I made the right decision, I think. So that's clearly not. I don't think a good option. Watch, he'll start at 9 and get a hat trick now, but which I'll be fine with, and then I'll just eat my hat. I think Trossard needs to be involved heavily in the attack, maybe even centrally, either him or Martinelli. Well, is Martinelli fit anymore?
Nope.
I've lost track of who's. Nope, he's done.
Out for a month.
Great. Yeah, that's right. He just got injured. I repressed that. So who do we actually? I guess let's start with that. So
it's going to be probably the front three of Sterling, Trossard, and
maybe
Norier.
Rice,
Norier, Trossard, and
one year.
Yeah,
And Sterling.
and Sterling.
And Sterling, I think it's going to have to be a front three of those of Nwaneri, Sterling, and Trossard.
You sure you don't want Nathan Butler or Udeshi?
I'm getting excited to see him. Yeah, I think it's his time to shine. But look, clearly, I think you need some senior players, more senior players than that. But
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a great story if he came in and did a job. But I don't want. Do you want to bet the farm on that? Like I don't.
No, not really.
No, I don't think anybody realistically does.
No. So that's, I guess, attacking wise, that's my thoughts. Sham, what about you?
So I did see this one lineup on my Twitter timeline. I looked at it and my first thought was, this is insane. And then have you guys ever seen the movie Master of Disguise?
Of course.
Yeah. Dana Carvey.
Yeah, exactly. So I at first I was like, that's crazy. And then I was like, that's so crazy that just might work. Well, so it's a 3-4-3, right? He put Timber in the back three. I would do White. So White, Saliba, Gabriel, and then ahead of them, bank of 4, Timber, Partey, Rice, Calafiori, or Lewis Skelly, depending on which one you want to put there.
On the right?
No, on the left.
On the left. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so Timber would be playing right wing.
On the right wing. Okay. I'm looking at it like on a pitch in my head.
Yeah. And then in front of them, I would play Trossard and Odegaard as dual 10s, and then Nwaneri as the lone striker. And I think it's not amazing, but I think it's a good don't lose lineup. And then
do you want to know something weird?
Yeah.
That's kind of almost like a Wenger-ish lineup, like a lot of midfielders.
No, it really is. It's the most Wenger defending a lead in the 86-minute lineup, where you've put on like Abue and Gail Clichy to play as like the wingers.
Yeah. Wow. Drew, what do you think?
I mean, it's weird, but I guess I don't hate it only because when you look at what that front three would be, you would get so many interchangeable parts that it might actually pull Everton out of their shape, and that's kind of what you want because, I mean, if anyone who watched the Everton match earlier today against Liverpool, say what you want, but under Moyes, they're so much better than they are under Dyche. So much better. Yeah. They've already matched the same amount of wins that Dyche had before he got sacked. I think their goal difference is like 400-500 times better. They're actually getting results. This is going to be a more tricky fixture than people realize. Obviously, last Merseyside derby at Goodison had that extra percentage points in the tank for them. They didn't want to lose at home. Obviously, but Everton are a much better side now than they were.
I was like, I have not been following Arsenal enough, but I think we're playing Leicester.
Sorry, I don't know why. Sorry. No, against Leicester, we should be winning. Period. I have no idea why I just teleported to Everton. I do kind of feel like though,
April 5th, not until April 5th.
Well, I think we're going to be having the same discussion April 5th, so we'll just go with that. But I do kind of feel like we should be beating Leicester. I mean, that I feel like if you go with that lineup, you're looking at a team that would probably just kind of saying, can we just get a goal by halftime and just kind of shut Leicester out, who are still pretty decent on the counter. I think that would kind of be a good way to counteract that. They still can do that through Vardy and a couple of other players. I don't think we're going to be looking at like a demolition job kind of scenario. I think if we skirt by with a 1-0 after what we've just been through over the last couple of weeks, I think most fans would probably take it. I think now we have to look at it as the best chance to maximize points.
Yeah,
and I think that gives us that requisite defensive stability that we need, that we've been kind of championing under Arteta, and enough attacking individual quality in the final third that might actually make the difference. You're not going to get a ton of creativity from that midfield. Of course, you might get some decent service from wide, but you're not like pulling strings, unless Declan can kind of put in one area through it and kind of let him put gap throws on a little bit. But I do think, if you do something like get Leicester in card trouble, pull them out of their shape, then it should be okay. But I think at this point it's just solutions for the next month, and who knows.
Yeah, and the next month of fixtures is not the worst it could be, right? Because we've got Leicester on Saturday, and then we don't play for a week, and then we play. Oh shit! What was Sorry, let me look this up.
I think it's West Ham.
We play Leicester, then we play West. Are you talking about what we
West
play?
Ham.
West Ham.
Yes.
We play West Ham on the 22nd, and then on the 26th we play Forest.
Yeah. So it's...
and then United away, Chelsea, Fulham, Everton, Brentford. Just keeps coming.
So I think Martinelli is hopefully back for the Chelsea game.
Yeah,
maybe not, but Leicester, and then 7 days, and then West Ham. The Forest match I'm a little worried about because it's only 4 days. You're going away to them. They've been phenomenal this season, and then you have a 10-day rest basically, and you go play at United. We'll see. I think United will be up for that game, but I still think we can roll out a better team than they do, and
then a week later we play Chelsea. So.
Yeah, and then Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea home, though, so,
Yeah. I kind of feel like I think we'd have to be happy with, 7 points from 9 if we're looking at Leicester, West Ham, Forest. I think it's hard to say that we should be beating Forest given our issues right now and how well they've been playing. They're legitimately a good side at this point. I think fans, it's not a fluke at this point. You don't get to almost March by the time we play them, just about. Them still sitting top 3 and saying it's kind of, they'll fall off. That's the same mentality we had during the year Leicester won the Premier League title. They never fell off. When we get to that point, they're there on merit. So
For Forest, I would just kind of play a deep block.
Yep.
To be honest, I know Sky Sports isn't going to like it, but I would just, because that's Forest's superpower is scoring on the counter, right?
Yep.
So if we go there and we try to play our game, of dominating possession and having the most field tilt and all that stuff without the proper guys to make that work, they're going to run right through us. But if we just make them have the ball and then see if maybe Trossard and Nwaneri and Sterling can come up with something on the counter, maybe there's something in it for us. But yeah, after you get past the United fixture, I really hope someone's back by then.
Fulham's also a tricky one, because you got a lot of ex-Arsenal players. You got anyway. Yeah, that one's. I wouldn't put too much credence in us being able to go to that one and not struggle a little bit. So
even under better circumstances, we've dropped points against Fulham previously, anyway, even when we've been fully fit. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a tricky one for us.
Yeah.
The way I see it is, we're not aiming for title winning pace anymore. We're just aiming to not lose every match.
Stem the bleeding.
Exactly.
Yeah. True.
So, just just try to take like 7 or like 5 to 7 of every 9, and hopefully that works out. So we'll see. In brighter news, before we take off here, did you guys happen to catch the Merseyside derby?
Yep.
Drew, you were saying it's one of your favorite non-Arsenal goals this season.
I mean, it's got to be, because I think for me, and a lot of fans can probably relate, one of the things I love most about football, whether if you're actually at the match or just watching on TV, even if it's not your club that's playing, the goosebumps you get when you see the limbs in the stand and people just lose their minds, that will always give me goosebumps. So that moment, given the context of it, it's Hollywood stuff. Like I said, it's the last match at Goodison Park, last match at Derby Goodison Park, rather, before they moved to their new ground against their rival. Had they have lost, the overall record would have been in Liverpool's hands. Now it's dead even for forever. They can cement that in the book. So I think, given those contextual points, and the most unlikely of goal scorers, Tarkovsky, I think I can count on both hands how many times he scored in his career or whatever it is. And certainly with the type of strike it was, that was a striker's finish too. It was just it was such a nice goal.
And the time of it, like the timing of the goal.
Yeah.
Insane amount of injury time.
Yep, that's the kind of thing that would happen to us and strip us of the title. So I'm glad that it happened to Liverpool to give them a moment of pause as well. But yeah, I think that goal, I mean, I'll probably go back and rewatch it again later because I loved it.
And look, I don't want to put too much hope in it, but that kind of a equalizing goal in that context can psychologically do stuff. I mean, I hate to have to rely on moments like that to win a title, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to just focus on top four.
I mean, dude, did you see the crash out that they had at the end of that game, though?
Yeah, I watched it, and I mean, Curtis Jones looked like he was literally about to get out brass knuckles. I've never seen a player that angry this season, and he was ready to rip someone's face off. And it's weird because Liverpool often, I mean, I can think of quite a few times where Liverpool have celebrated in front of away fans or home fans, depending where opposition fans will call it, no matter what it is. Whether if they're at Anfield or on the road, they've done it. So the fact that they took that kind of exception now shows that I think some of the players are still reeling about the fact that they lost to Plymouth. Obviously the context of this match, it's against your most bitter rival, Bar United. And Slot getting, I think he already had a match suspension this season already, so that's his second one. So I wonder what's going to happen with that. But I do feel like maybe they're starting to sweat just a little bit. But again, I'm with John. We can only hope, but so much this is going to be kind of like that pivotal. Yeah. You hope it is, but it probably isn't going to be. But there's that 1% chance. So it's.
What did I say earlier? I was like, how many gifts is the universe going to potentially give us that we just don't take advantage of?
Yeah.
So I've given up. I've given up on hoping. We just got to do our thing, man. We just got to do it. I don't really care what's going on around us to an extent. But that was a great match.
Yep.
A great match.
No, it was. Yeah, it was just it was a really good match. And just the way it now ends with the record at Goodison for Merseyside derbies being 41 wins, 41 losses, 38 draws. I think that's pretty special. But yeah, I'm not going to emotionally invest in this, but just the way they behaved when that first thing didn't go their way, when Jones tried to fight Decore and Arne Slot, when the goal went in, he ran at the fourth official and this, and then I don't know, it looked like he was gonna punch him for a second, and then got himself sent off, refused to do a post-match briefing. Van Dijk came out and was like, oh, this is their cup final, those guys.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah, well, I mean, if Arsenal players behaved like that, I tweeted earlier, if Arteta did what Slot did today, then, Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville and a Sky Sports crew would break into his house in the middle of the night and record a 2-hour special talking about what a little baby he is on his own couch.
I mean, we've already had issues like last time about not controlling our bench. This very season has already happened, so for a fact that if it was us with this, if this was against Spurs or whatever, we wouldn't hear the end of it on the media, like everything else. So, yeah.
So, It was just it was funny, but yeah, not gonna like emotionally invest in it. I think it's important just to focus on us and see what we can do. Just
enjoy it for what it was. It was like a great game and like a funny ending and haha Liverpool.
Exactly.
True.
Yeah. I was on the phone with one of my brothers. They're both Liverpool fans, and I was talking to one of them on the phone after the game, and he was just complaining left and right, and I was like, "You have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, right.
You guys are gonna be fine." And then he was like, I told him that Kai Havertz was out for the rest of the season, and he was like, "He's bad though, right?" And I was like, first of all, no. Second, like, that was our only striker, dude, so it doesn't even matter.
Is he bad? I mean, versus what?
If he's bad, then like who's like what would you say about like the academy kid who are gonna pull out if another guy gets injured? You know, with all due respect, they're probably good for their age group, but you know, yeah, not ready for the Premier League.
I guess we'll have to see. I also wanted to preface this for those of you that tuned in, thanks, but also, because this is the first episode, we let it run much longer than what our normal episodes would be, so just bear that in mind. We're not going to have War and Peace every single week, so don't worry about that.
Yeah. We're gonna have segments.
Yeah.
We're gonna be organized. And yeah, it'll be great. So yeah, we'll probably wrap it up there unless... Wait, Drew, did you have a stat that was going to piss me off?
Yeah, the stat was that Nicholas Jackson played 1,000 fewer minutes and still did his hamstring. So my point was that the hamstrings will just go when they go, and sometimes it's just crap luck because hamstrings wanted a hamstring. Exactly. Exactly that. So yeah, just one of those things.
Well, I will stew on that for the next few days. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to the first ever episode of Not That Kind of Gooner. And yeah, we'll be back. I think we were talking Monday night, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah,
Tuesday?
we were doing a pre-match and then a post-match event, and then length depending on context of the week, you know. But yeah, we'll be
the space. You'll find out
exactly.
Yeah.
So will we.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And like we said before, you can follow me at Shamsdale on Twitter and Blue Sky. You can follow Drew at Geechee Kid on Twitter and Supply and Demand Drew on Blue Sky. You can follow John at 305cast on Twitter and at Yellow Ribbons on Blue Sky. You can follow the pod on on both those platforms at Not That Gooner. Also, we're on Instagram at Not That Kind of Gooner. And yeah, plenty of good things coming. Like John said, watch the space, and we will talk to you, hopefully, after a win against Leicester. And hopefully, in that time, I will come up with a better sign-off line. So, until then, take care, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.